Tana tira, tēnā koutou katoa. We acknowledge that there is a strength beyond ourselves when we work together to serve others. May we put aside our personal interests, work with integrity and openness, striving to create a community that supports its people and the environment. Let us, in a moment of quiet, focus on why we are here. We give thanks for the wisdom of the past, look for opportunities in the present, and accept the challenges of the future. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa. Kia pai te hare. Welcome everybody to our final council meeting of 2019. I have assured staff that there will be no extraordinary council meetings called between now and Christmas. So I'll provide that assurance to councillors as well. Just a reminder, of course, that we are live streaming this meeting. We have also had a request from media to record. He does not appear to be here at this point in time, but may appear. So. Bringing that to everyone's attention. Now we have apologies from Councillor Wright. If there's no other apologies, thank you. Moved by Councillor Bogue, seconded by Councillor Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye. 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 Against? Carried. Do we have any conflicts of interest? No? Fabulous. And there is no presentations in the public forum today, so moving on to announcements by the Mayor. I would just like to take the opportunity to everyone present to say thank you for all the hard work that's gone on, not only over the last few months with the new council, but of course for the whole year. It has certainly been a busy one, and there's been some pretty hefty issues that we've been dealing with, and everyone has behaved with professionalism and integrity and represented our community well, so thank you for that. And I wish you all and your whānau and family and friends a very, very Merry Christmas if I don't see you between now and next Wednesday. Now, are there any minor matters for discussion to be brought onto the agenda? No? Very. And announcements by management.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Mayor. Just to reiterate what the Mayor just said, just to wish everyone a Merry Christmas from staff. It's been a big year, and we've certainly enjoyed working with you over the last few months, taking you through what it is to be part of council, and look forward to working with you in the year. So have a safe and enjoyable new year.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to confirmation of the minutes from the ordinary meeting of council held on Thursday, the 5th of December 2019. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Crown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And we are very privileged today, our first agenda item, to have Stuart Ainsley and Tony Porter from the Hawke's Bay Airport presenting their annual report for 2019 for us. I welcome you up to share all of your good news with us.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a real pleasure to be presenting the annual result, but I thought, given it 6 months ago, I would cover the financials as quickly as I can, because I'm sure it's about the future that people around this table are more interested in than what was a very good year last year. So have we got the button to press the slide changes?
Do we just drive it here?
Yep.
Oh, right.
No.
There we go.
Oh, so that one just welcomes and acknowledges. That's quick. That next one, please.
Arrow keys?
Try the forward arrow key.
Yeah.
We just drew.
Bit technical.
Page up,
No.
the page up or down.
Try arrows.
Well, I do like a short presentation.
Well, it is a very quick. So that covers it all.
It doesn't sound like you up here, to be honest.
I'm pressing the same button that I did the last time. It's not doing it.
Well, but I'll carry on anyway. The year was marred by the voluntary administration of Arrow, but thanks to the excellent work done by the board and staff, we only lost 3 weeks. And no subbies. We employed all the subbies which were local, and none of them lost any money. So my greatest fear was that subcontractors tend to be the poor guys that suffer when these things happen. But administrators were very good, and our guys reacted very quickly. And pleasing to see, the photo up there is of the baggage claim, which opened in I think February. End of January. And now people have recently been out there will have seen that we've opened the departure lounge, and we're busy working on the middle bit, which will give a bit of enjoyment to everybody. So next slide. We had, of course, the 8% growth last year, but it is marred by the fact that we no longer have Jetstar, and Stuart will address the impact of Jetstar. But in terms of last financial year, they continued to fly right through the year, and we had 8% growth. But as a result of the financial uncertainty, we decided that we could not declare a dividend for this last year, and so there'll be no dividend paid out this year. It's a cash flow issue. Everything else is continuing very positively, but for the first time I've had to cancel the dividend. But I think that's a prudent thing to do, and it's what the board has done. If you have a look here, you'll see the growth. The growth wasn't just Jetstar. Jetstar, in fact, were very flat through last year, but Air New Zealand continued to grow noticeably. So that was very pleasing, and their base growth has continued on, as Stuart will talk about. Next slide. 750 passengers for us was a highlight. That will drop back, as Stuart will explain, but we had record revenue, record operating expenditure, which isn't so good, but it was all one-offs, and we obviously had to spend a fair bit of money with Arrows on legal fee, and we had some one-off staff costs that we had to deal with during the year. So all in all, last year was very good. The impact was 1.5 million, which again was a record, I think. Next slide. Profit and loss, there you can see that the variances are all positive numbers down there. So next one, please. Just quickly looking at the revenue from different sources, my ambition as chairman was to get to 50% non-aeronautical revenue, but as fast as we could grow the non-aeronautical revenue, the aviation revenue kept growing ahead of me. So it's not a bad story. I've failed in what I would like to have done, but we've achieved very good growth in all our sectors. Next slide, please. The balance sheet continues to show good growth, and we're up to over 50 million of total assets now. And so that's very pleasing when I think what those numbers were when we first took over the airport. And so I guess I've really covered those points. I'm trying to rush this through. Just one mention of the ambassador scheme. They've been a great success. They're marvellous people. They thoroughly enjoy their job, and every one of them, I think, is coming back for another go next year. And they've made a real difference at a time when it's difficult at the airport to find your way around. Where do we go? Where are the toilets now? They're doing a fantastic job. So I just want to acknowledge our ambassadors and the impact they've had on the travelling public, which has been nothing but positive. And of course, we work together on the new road into the airport. Watchman Road is a howling success, keeps winning prizes, awards. So it's a working collaborative. It's a real example of how we work with NZTA, yourselves, and us, and have produced something everybody in the region is proud of. I think that's just about my lot.
I think it's on to 5 national awards now, this.
5, is it? Right, yeah.
Basically.
And the statement of service performance, which we reported to you as the statement of intent, you'll see that the majority of them are green. We've exceeded our expectation, and the few that are orange well, one relates to my failure to get 50%, but we did diversify the base, not as much as we had hoped, and we've done a lot of work in the environmental area, but we decided not to do the waste audit. There's far more things that Stuart will talk about that we've aimed for, so we're very pleased with the advance in environmental area. Is that it?
I believe so.
Right, so any questions? Sorry to... Oh, no, one final thing. We presented to Hastings District Council last week, and there were a lot of new councillors very interested in understanding the airport business. So we resolved to have a joint meeting with yourselves, and we'll have a workshop in the new year, and we'll go through the airport business, because it's a different sort of business, and so we can have a workshop and just go through the detail of it, and so we look forward to that in the new year.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, yeah.
I think we were just quite keen to build better awareness about how our business model works and how revenue's derived, and some of the specific challenges will have been a regional airport.
Yeah,
so.
and they were sort of asking questions would take us all day and all night, and I'm sure you've got better things to do with your time than... we'll do that in the new year when we've got a bit of time set aside for it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So if there's no questions, we'll go on to Stuart's talking about the future, which I'm sure people will be far more interested in.
I had a question, if that's all right, Tony.
Yeah.
What was the projected dividend that you had expected to provide this financial
We
year?
usually pay 40% of NPAT, which, and the NPAT was...
Just under 600,000.
Yeah.
600,000, okay.
So that's the total dividend. Half that goes to the government, and you get 26%, and Hastings get 24%.
Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, knowing that the government also partners in this, have you had any kickback from them or issues or worries with not paying a dividend?
No, I thought you guys would be very understanding, but I was less confident that they would be. But they understood the situation with Jetstar and quickly agreed, and we had no pushback at all, did we? No.
I think we've had good commentary with Treasury over the last 12 months, so it has been an extraordinary year, with the Arrow event and then with the Jetstar pullout. So it's more a case of just prudence, I think, in saying, well, because we've got 12 months in front of us that we don't really understand what Air New Zealand are going to do, what's that going to look like. So I think it was just a prudent decision, really, to say if we're going to not pay a dividend, this is probably the time to do it until we know where we're heading. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a look at our forward-looking forecast as well, which I'll maybe paint a bit of a different picture about what the impact that Jetstar will or won't do in the next 5 years.
Right.
Over to me.
Over
I
to
was
you.
checking because that wasn't my phone that went off. And I thought that's definitely not my ringtone. So good morning, everyone. Look, it's great to have the opportunity to talk about what has been actually for us a really fantastic year, but marred, as Tony said, by a couple of those pretty significant events. So I'm happy to sort of focus on any of the points that have come up before if you want to build on any key points, but I'm going to focus more on the forward-looking part of our strategy now. I just wanted to give a little bit of an outlook. I think obviously being a regional airport, one of the key challenges we have is we don't have a lot of airlines in our pool to grow capacity, and especially when you're not an international airport where you've got lots of tails sitting on your apron. So when we get a major airline pull out, it does have a pretty significant impact, not just on the revenue, but in terms of the whole dynamics of the business and the relationship moving forward. I think for the next 12 to 18 months, what we see is a little bit of turbulence. What do I mean by that? Well, we don't exactly know how Air New Zealand is going to respond into the next 12 to 18 months, but so far they've been fairly committed in saying that they're going to put on extra seat capacity, and they've now published their schedule into the northern summer, so that's looking like they're going to take up about an extra 30 to 40% of the seats that were lost by Jetstar. I think the flip side of that and the concern to us is, and it's been mirrored around conversations I have in the community, is what's going to happen to the airfare prices. And we are actually tracking airfares, and we're starting to see that index up a bit. So I think, as you know, one of my key points here about collaboration is, as a region, we need to work together around air services development and work out how we can attract more capacity into the region, and ideally attract further airlines as well. So that's something that we're working on with Hawkesbury Tourism, the business hub, and it's a discussion I've been having with all the councils really about how we can work and collaborate on that. The downside against our SOI is last year, with the uncertainty of not knowing what was going to happen with Jetstar, we actually set quite an ambitious bar, and I have to say that moving forward, that SOI is going to be a much higher goal to try and achieve at the end of the year. But I think by the end of the financial year, we'll still come in with a healthy profit and quite a clear strategy moving forward. Another thing that's happening on the horizon, and some of you might be aware of it, but regional security screening for passengers and for bags going out of regional ports is highly probable that the government will make a decision on that. One of the good things in terms of the investment we've made in the airport terminal is that we've got the capacity to switch that on when we need to. So we're effectively security ready if the government make that decision to bring in regional security screening. The advent of jets is another big talking point. We are ready with the capacity and the runway length to do domestic jets. I don't think we'll see that necessarily in the short term, but there is the possibility of bringing jets into Hawke's Bay, and hey, if they move to another regional airport, we'll probably get more ATRs, so it's kind of a win-win situation in terms of adding additional seat capacity. Another thing, we're quite happy by the media attention that we got, I think, on Tuesday. If you've seen our front page about carbon neutral, we've been watching closely what's happening around the globe, and there's a lot of focus obviously on the aviation industry as a whole. Airports don't have as significant an impact on that carbon footprint that aviation has, but we see that we're a key contributor, and we need to play our part in what we do moving forward. So sustainability is something that we'll talk about, but that's going to be a big focus for us in line with our strategy moving forward. And also to create more resilience in our revenue, property development. This is an area strategically for the airport. It's been very difficult to get property off the ground. A lot of challenges around, like, land ownership, services, environmental considerations. So moving forward, we're very keen to work out, now that we've completed our master plan review, to see how we can get our property development portfolio at the airport on the business park as you come in off Watchman Road off the ground over the next couple of years. So that's going to be a big focus to try and drive some resilience in our revenue streams. That's it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about growth. So I think for the next 18 months we are going to see a bit of flattening now that we've seen Jetstar pull out the market, but all the indications, even on last year, we've seen between 2 to 3% growth. And we're confident that Air New Zealand will continue to see, beyond that 2 years, 5 to 7% growth on our seat capacity moving forward. So we're going to, for the next like 18 to 24 months, see a bit of a plateau, and then we'll start to grow. So we're still confident that we're going to be in between that low to medium growth that we've forecast moving forward. This is the only slide I've got with a lot of numbers on it, so bear with me, please. This is some work that we've just done recently in terms of looking at our forecast. I get asked a lot of questions. What's the impact to Jetstar? So the key impact to Jetstar is we're going to potentially drop about $500,000 worth of revenue. But the other side of the equation is that over the last year, the team has been looking at all the other revenue generating areas like car parking, retail, car rentals, and we've actually seen those starting to increase, so those are growing. We are able to, under our aeronautical pricing recovery, we're able to set charges with airlines, and there's always a silver lining that now we're able to go into consultation with Air New Zealand to reset the prices for the start of next financial year. So we've started that process. So based on moving to a per passenger charge, which we've had some indicative discussions with Air New Zealand on, that you can see the impact on our revenue and the forecast sales there. So by about July 2022, we expect that we'll get up to about that $10 million of revenue. Our expense line we expect to flatten out as we drive some efficiency in our organisation. We did have some extraordinary expense costs last year, which were really based around restructuring so that we could drive our strategic plan moving forward. But we expect some of that revenue also to grow in the property space as well. I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but this is our key strategic framework. I think I presented this at council last year, and this is what we live and breathe by, basically. Our 5 key areas: commercial, people, property, partners and operations. We've got that aspiration of 1 million passengers, and somebody quoted me the other day. I still think that that's an achievable goal, because as well as you get negative shocks to the system, you can always get positive shocks to the system. So our focus is on how can we grow more seat capacity and bring airlines into the region. Harder to attain, but still attainable all the same. Just want to talk a bit about our operations strategy, just a couple of headlines on this. This year, 2 key milestones with our regulator. One was that we got our 5-year recertification signed off with our regulator, which means we'll have a licence to operate for another 5 years. And when we reported at our AGM, we were actually going through a safety management system audit. We're pleased to announce that we've actually passed that audit, and we've now got a safety management certificate. So what's notable about it is that we were the first airport in 13 airports, including Auckland, to have 0 findings. So that was a pretty big achievement for a small team, actually. Tony's talked quite a lot. We're very proud of the work that we've done to create our subsidiary. We've novated all the subcontractors, and it's notable to say that we've actually opened an arrivals part of our terminal and a departures part of our terminal within 12 calendar months. So that was no easy feat, and I have to say that for those of you that have had the chance to see the back of house of our airport terminal, and you will get a chance hopefully on a tour at some point, all the new baggage handling system has all been built operational, and that's something that's a complete step change, not just for the airport team but also for the airlines, operating brand new system, all working from day 1 on the 5th of November. Just want to talk, I've talked a bit about our property, but just to go into this a bit deeper, we've actually now completed our 20-year master plan technical studies. We've done on-site airport stakeholder engagement and with a bunch of other stakeholders, so we've basically tabled that plan and what our aspirations are. one of the key sort of points that I'd like to highlight in that is that we have an aspiration to actually close the crosswind runway, which we think will help us optimise land use moving forward. We've done a lot of studies on that, and we seem to have general support from the GA community. I have to say we have to do a bit of broader work from Bridge Pa in terms of smaller general aviation stuff, because we actually see a lot of that smaller movement migrating to Bridge Pa, but they actually want it to migrate to us. So that's a bit of a challenge for us. But I think we need to think a bit more broadly around things like, can we develop like flight training schools and things like that? And we're interested if we can do larger scale type developments, but we're not so interested in seeing small kind of, you know, Cessna type aircraft hangars, but we've got bigger aspirations for the property development site moving forward. We do have some discussions in the wind where we've got some potential tenants that are interested in putting in some key developments on site, and we're keen to work with the council about how we can realise that. I know there's a discussion going on about regional land use, and I think I've said this quite openly before, but I feel like we've had quite a lot of impediments, and we have work to do in terms of understanding how we can quickly expedite property development. But I want to work with council and other stakeholders to see how we can actually move our property aspirations forward, because it's a key part of the airport's resilience, I think, moving into the future. And also I think we play a key part in terms of that regional land use strategy. Yeah. So I'll just touch a little bit on sustainability. This is an area that our team's moved quite, I have to say, in 12 months has moved from almost hardly having dialogue about it to actually doing some pretty significant stuff. So we're talking about waste management strategies as a group with some of our shareholders. We're now mapping out all our carbon. We've signed up to the airport carbon accreditation scheme, which is part of the Airport Council International. So it's a globally recognised airport metric. So by January we hope to have level 1 signed off, and then we move on to level 2. As some of you will be aware, we have got this aspiration of developing a solar farm on the airport, roughly 1 megawatt to 1 hectares of land. We have a lot of land on the airport that we just simply can't build on it, but we could actually build a solar farm on. So we've got a couple of areas that we've earmarked that we think would be ideal to maybe put between 3 to 6 hectares of safeguarding for future solar farm. In the next couple of years, I believe it's achievable that we could get a 1 to 1.5 megawatt solar farm out of the ground and actually working. And we are working with some partners on that technical feasibility, potential capital investors, that sort of thing. So we're making some progress in that space. So between now and probably March, we hope to have more detail to announce about how that project is progressing. And on our property development as well, I also wanted to say that, New Zealand, let's be really honest, there's a lot of building stock around that we can't honestly hand on heart say is good quality green building stock. It's inefficient. It's legacy building, and we either have to retrofit or we have to build new quality building stock, and I know there's a cost premium with doing that, but one of our aspirations is we develop property on airport, let's look and see if we can actually make it have high green credentials as well. So that's what I'm referring to about sustainable development guidelines. I'm not going to go into this, and you probably can't read it anyway, but this is our sustainability framework which we've launched out. So basically this underpins our whole strategic plan moving forward. So the economy and environmental excellence, social responsibility, and also operational efficiency. So every bit of capital we invest moving forward, we look at, is that the right way to spend money on capital? Can we get more aeroplanes out of less asphalt? What do we do when we do property development? How are we going to manage the stormwater? What's our deeper engagement into the community through our partnerships and our social licence? So that's something that we developed last year, and it's now starting to become part of our everyday corporate language. Just wanted to touch a little bit on commercials. I've touched on regional aviation development. As I said, I don't think the airport can do regional air services development on their own. We need to do that collaboratively with the rest of the regional partners. I've talked a bit about our opportunity to get a greater recovery in our aeronautical pricing. Ground transport, hopefully a lot of you have borne with us as we've gone through 12 months of machinations in our car park. So has anyone been out at the airport in the last week, driven out or flown?
Yes.
We've got the new roundabout open, and all the new pay stations are up and running. We've now got, you can pay with your credit card on the way in and the way out, so you don't actually need a ticket. And then next year we're looking to evolve to licence plate recognition. So we've already put all the infrastructure in the ground. It's just about installing cameras. But what we didn't want to do was make too many technological leaps too quickly, because people have got to use it. And as I'm sure you know, you get a lot of complaints about car parking. So so far the reception's been good. We're just working through some tweaks in it. The other thing that's quite key is that there's a change in the way people are using public transport, and we're starting to see Uber and the likes of Ola and that starting to come to the airport. So far I think we're getting about 8 pickups on Uber a day. And we expect that to grow. That impacts on taxis, it impacts on car parking. So we're looking at how we can manage those changes into the future. We've also set up a wait zone area. We know that there's a propensity for certain people to come into the airport, and rather than park for 5 minutes, they'll drive round for 15 minutes. 15 times around the loop, right? And that happens all the time. So we said, how are we going to mitigate this? So we've actually set up like a wait zone, like a text and wait area. So as long as you don't leave your car, you can sit there and then you can pick your passenger up. And that just helps us take some congestion off that front forecourt area. And another thing we've started to venture into is we're working through our retail food and beverage offering. We've got some offers on the table. We've started to now got an understanding of what that's going to look and feel like, and we're quite excited about that. And digital advertising, you'll see that there's now some dynamic displays appearing in the airport, which allows us to change the way we advertise, but also I think we get 3-fold increase in our revenue stream, so it's a good revenue generating activity. I think I've talked about the car park, so we'll move on from that. I just wanted to talk quickly about our CAPEX expenditure. So given one of the key things to note, obviously, is given the announcement of Jetstar, that does give us the opportunity to probably push out some of the capital investment we were going to make into apron expansion. So i.e. we don't need to build as much aircraft parking as soon as we thought we might. The other thing that, as I alluded to earlier on, we don't actually know fully when it will happen, but aviation security will come with some costs and infrastructure and things like that in terms of new equipment. So that's something that we've planned for in our CAPEX moving forward. And I've also talked a bit, this is something we've been extremely proud of over the last year. One of the things that when we reset our strategic vision, we said, like, how do we build our partnerships across the region? And we, some of these are partnerships, some of them are like cash-related sponsorships, but I feel we've really done a lot to build our connection to the rest of the region through a lot of these partnerships. And Tony mentioned this is kind of going to sleep, I think. I'll just jump on one. Tony mentioned our ambassadors. I think we've got about 33 ambassadors at the moment, and out of that picture, I think we've only had one person has actually said, look, we can't actually do the hours, and that's because they had a day job as well. So we had a bit of a Christmas function on Saturday for them all, and mirror what Tony's saying. They actually love working at the airport, and I asked them, are you all going to come back? And he said, yeah, we really want to come back. But they just love being that sort of front face to the community and helping answer questions. One of the other things that's important here, though, is that at the beginning of the year we started doing an airport service quality metric, which is also a global metric where we can map against other airports. So they've actually been doing the survey. So we've got the results on that. So the next council update will be able to share what passengers are saying about the airport. Two key things that come to mind. One is they say that thing that we're really, really good at is friendliness and helpfulness, and I believe that's got a lot to do with that group of people that are on the screen. Two things that we can do better at is choice in things like retail and food and beverage, and the other one was about value for money in the car park, and those are both strategies that we've actually got in hand. I think that was about all I was really going to say, but I just finish up by saying that I was asked at Hastings District Council about, just like increases in expenses, and I thought it was worth making the point that we started off a couple of years ago and the airport actually had a very small team, and if we're going to deliver some key strategic outcomes around our property and our customer service, and all these safety management system things don't happen without resource and people, so we've made an investment in getting the team and the capability at the right size to deliver that moving forward. And I think we have a great team of people, including their ambassadors, and that's really helped underpin our journey moving forward. So that's all I was going to go through. I'm happy to take any questions on anything. Thank you.
Councillor Brosnan.
Thanks, Stuart and Tony. I had a couple of points that I just wanted to, a couple of questions, I suppose. So the first one was around the exiting of Jetstar.
Yes.
I presume you had some conversations at the time that they were leaving around why that was happening. Are you able to share with us, was that around capacity? We obviously saw that their numbers weren't growing at the same rate of the others. Is it reputational? What's your feeling around why that happened? And is the door open for either them to come back or another, because competition was really key, I suppose, in that price discussion.
Well, I'll give you two responses to that. One is what I believe are the facts, and the other one which I believe is my thoughts on the future, right? But I think from a factual base, ever since Jetstar entered the market, they only ever had 4 ATRs in the whole of New Zealand on the regional routes. And all the regional airports were always fighting for that capacity. They are Jetstar, if people have flown on them in Australasia, like Australia, they operate jets. That's what they operate. They don't operate turboprops. They entered New Zealand with turboprops as a bit of an experiment, I suppose. On every ATR that they've been operating, they've been losing $1 million per annum. They're a low-cost airline. Arguably, they've never been able to get the loyalty of business travellers to get that sort of seat demand and build the revenue moving forward. So I think they've struggled from day one. It's important to point out, though, that where they're operating jet services, they continue to be successful. So I think the turboprop and their operating model just potentially weren't a good fit. So this isn't a Hawke's Bay story, it's a New Zealand incorporated story. So I think we had looked at forecast with them out and with them in, and I think the thing that really caught everybody by surprise was the timing of when they actually exited, because everybody thought that they were at least going to stay in for another couple of years until their fleet decisions came to the end. But for whatever reason, they decided to pull it out early, and I suspect that's because Qantas Group they're a very large airline, and I think one of the only non-profitable parts of Qantas Group's business was regional New Zealand. So if I was the CEO, I'd probably go, why are we still doing that? So I'd have loved to have seen them staying, but people have said, well, they didn't try hard enough with their seat prices. But when you start to rise the airfare up, you start skimming off the bottom of Air New Zealand, and then you're competing with Air New Zealand, and then you're on a hide into nothing. So that's my personal view on that. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And the door's still open if competition comes in future?
Well, that, and this again, it's a personal thought, but that the point about jets is that if the economics worked in the future, is there any reason why Jetstar couldn't operate jets to Hawke's Bay, Auckland? Absolutely, but I think the reality is that that's not going to happen in the next 5 years. You know, security screening is an enabler for that, but I think there's also a number of impediments, sector length being one of them. You know, like Napier, Auckland's quite a short sector length.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, I just had another point I suppose I just wanted to tease out with you. I was really, really pleased in your annual report to read through the case studies around the sustainability stuff, especially the wildlife management and the regeneration things. And I note that you've got a new, is it a contestable fund in there that the West Shore group have taken up around that
Are you referring to biodiversity Hawke's Bay?
Yes. So
So
is that your funding through Biodiversity Hawke's Bay?
So going back a step, we've got a relationship with Biodiversity Hawke's Bay where we put a certain cash amount in, but there's also a lot of contra and partnership and work to that relationship. The West Shore Gap area was, well, one is, you know, that it's safeguarded as part of the cross runway, so there's some specific flora and fauna there that's protected, and I think that was one of the first projects off the bat that was funded through Biodiversity Hawke's Bay, so it was a good sort of, you know, start for Biodiversity Hawke's Bay to look at some of these reinvigoration projects.
Yeah, perfect. And the only other point I suppose I wanted to make on that is when you put up your 5 strategic kind of goals as part of your organisation, bearing in mind that you're increasing your work, your resourcing into the biodiversity space, I'd be quite keen to see some environment reflected in your strategic goals, possibly when you do that first review of those.
When you, if I take you back to the slide I put up with the sustainability framework, we've got our 5 key corporate strategic pillars, and our framework sits right over the top of those. So for every focus area, whether that's property or operations, against each of those sustainability dimensions, there's actually, we've actually got another slide that I haven't got here that's got things in there like projects we're doing with the community or some we're doing on solar farms. So we've actually mapped that framework back to the strategic plan, so it sort of fits over the top of it. So it's kind of like safety, it becomes part of the DNA on how we do business moving forward. So environment is actually included in that.
Is key,
Yeah, it's key, it's fundamental.
Yeah, because I think from my perspective, the position that you're in, right next to the estuary, as well as your ability to fund projects in the space, really make you a potential leader in our whole kind of biodiversity strategy and corridor development. Yeah. So, and obviously that has some conflict with the need to keep bird life out of the flight paths. Yeah. But just acknowledging that.
But I have to say on that you know, when I first came to Hawke's Bay and I saw the amazing work that had been done on Watchman Road with the water reserves, my first reaction was, why are we building a bird sanctuary next to an airport? And I've said that quite openly. But that said, I think we've invested over the last year in a lot of wildlife management training. So our team used to go out and do things and they didn't actually know the cause and effect. So now they go out and they're doing, like, they don't cut grass in certain areas if that's going to attract a certain type of bird. They've got a number of strategies. I think this year is that we get quarterly reports from the CAA on bird strikes, and regionally Hawke's Bay is actually one of the highest bird strike because of our environment, right? But the last quarter we had the lowest result we did in 3 years. So that means that our strategy is working. So I think, you know, black swans aren't actually a problem. It's other birds like Canadian geese that are, you know, they're pests anyway, sort of thing. So we're working with Department of Conservation to work out how we can manage that, and some of the blackback gulls and things like that are actually off the airport but are in our flight path areas where they're at risk. Yeah. So.
And I think just final comment from me, sorry, Madam Mayor, we built an airport in the middle of a bird sanctuary. That's the answer to why are we building a bird sanctuary in the middle of an airport. It's the other way
And
around.
an earthquake.
Yeah.
Good.
Any further questions from councillors?
Yeah, I just wanted to congratulate Tony and the rest of the company on their efforts, the state of the accounts, and congratulate them on the 750,000 passenger movements. I think that's quite a significant achievement for the airport, and I think it demonstrates good growth in our tourism and business sectors, so I think it's a positive outcome. Thank you.
And through you, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to also endorse the ambassadors. I've had numerous experiences with them and they're brilliant.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
So yes, congratulations on an incredible year and strong financial result, particularly considering the challenges around the Arrow voluntary liquidation and the fact that you were able to pull together your own subsidiary company and you're on target to finish with just a delay of 3 weeks is to be, congratulated. That's incredible. So, and obviously, as Councillor Mawson said, I too have had experiences with your ambassadors and they're fantastic. I've had a number of conversations with them and you can see how much they love what they're doing. And as a region, we should all be very proud of the new Watchman Road entranceway there. It's, really is a testament to all of the organisations that pulled together to deliver that project. And then your latest news around that carbon neutral goal and that whole sustainability framework, again, some excellent goals and objectives that you're working towards there. So thank you very much for coming to present to us today. Do I have a mover and seconder to accept the report? Thank you, Councillor Simpson and Councillor Tapani. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
And to you.
Thank you.
Bingo bells.
Moving on to our second agenda item today, the Water Review Procurement Strategy, and I invite Catherine Bailey, our Manager of Asset Strategy, to come and talk us through the paper. Welcome.
Right. Good morning, everyone. What a great way to end the year, looking at the way forward for next year with water. And here we are again talking about water. Before we go into talking about the strategy and the procurement plan, thought it might be useful just to go through some of the background as to why we're doing this review in the first place and how we got there. So we'll do a little bit of talking, but please feel free to step in and ask questions as we go. More than happy to. Okay. So in June of 2019, so June this year, Council made a commitment to water being our number one priority. And as part of that, we've put forward $200,000 to do a review for a chlorine-free network, to look at the costs and options for going chlorine-free safely. So since 2017, in 2017, we had 5 transgressions in our network. So that was 5 positive E. coli results, which indicates fecal contamination in our water supply. And at that point, it was agreed with the public health unit in Hawke's Bay that we would chlorinate the network to manage that risk. Since then, as you know, we've had numerous issues with dirty water events in our network. And this has been hitting a lot of suburbs particularly hard. So Tamati, Pinamai and Onikawa have been particularly badly hit by this. And it's been pretty awful for people, and we've been battling through trying to find or look at numerous ways to try and manage this issue. So we're aware that some people have really, really struggled, and it's pretty unfair that they're putting up with this ongoing issue. So today we'll be talking about some of the ways that we're looking at dealing with that now, but also some of the longer term projects that we've got underway to help with dirty water. So we can't talk about dirty water without talking about chlorination, because that is the view of the populace that the two are related. So what causes dirty water? Three main issues. We've got biofilm in our pipe work. Some of that is historical, some of it just is ongoing and needs to be dealt with. We have manganese in our source water, which when oxidised turns into a black substance that then discolours the water. And we've got the flow issues in our network and the way that our network is set up. So if you look at Onekawa-Piramai and Tamatea, they're basically at the confluence of two major parts of the network. They're essentially in the middle. So if you think of the confluence of two rivers and how turbid that is, and how you get a lot of water moving around, that's essentially what we're ending up with in those suburbs. So three main issues, three ways that we can address the dirty water issues. We can't remove chlorine now, which I'll talk about. But I want to assure Council and the community that we are looking at this problem from all sorts of different angles, and we will talk about that. And we want to assure you that water safety is our priority, as is having clean water for our community. So, on to the issue of why can't we remove chlorine now? So, essentially, we have a contract with the Ministry of Health of how we're managing risks in our water supply. And that is demonstrated through an operational document, which is our water safety plan. And in that, we have to address the 6 fundamental principles of water safety, and we have to show that we are implementing what we say we will do in the water safety plan. So in our water safety plan, we have to manage a multi-barrier, or have a multi-barrier approach to water safety. And one of the barriers that we have is residual disinfection, so chlorination. And we are expected to deliver upon that promise, as we have this document that says that this is what we will do, and that's how we will manage our risk. So this year we had a new Health Drinking Water Amendment Act, and that requires all suppliers to have an approved water safety plan, and we are expected to demonstrate that we are implementing that plan. So our water safety plan has a number of improvements that we have to deliver, and at some point we'll also have to move to the new water safety plan, which is a more stringent document, which looks at risks in a more stringent way. So that's something that we will be working towards as well. So whichever option we go for, or the community decides to go for, or we decide to go for in the future, we'll have to deliver safe water that is in alignment with our national legislation, and we will have to demonstrate safety in alignment with or through the new framework of the water safety plan. So if we turned chlorine off now, we would be putting our community at risk. We wouldn't be able to demonstrate that we are managing the risks that have been identified with our drinking water assessor in our water safety plan. But we would also be in breach of the Health Act. The Ministry are proposing to bring in permanent chlorination, and they have enabled an out clause, which is providing some kind of acceptable alternative, and that's really what the chlorine-free review will be addressing. So you could say that this project is going to provide the country with a blueprint for safe chlorine-free water. So essentially we are leading the way by doing this project.
So Kath, so just to go back to looking at potential interim chlorine-free options, Christchurch and Auckland City Council have acoustic sensors which they use to assess the pipes in their network and identify where there are any leaks or low pressure. In terms of that being an option for us going forward, what sort of timeframes would we be looking at, to invest in the sensors, run them through our network, identify the areas that need to be prioritised for repair, to move down that path?
Sure. So acoustic sensors, having them in our network is something that we would aim to do anyway, regardless of whether or not we were chlorine or chlorine-free. They are a management tool, and we've recently, or have we actually engaged the contractor yet for the leak detection?
No, we are engaging within 1 month.
Right. So we've got a 3-year leak detection program that we're about to engage a contractor to do for us, and that will cover the entire network and will highlight areas where we need to concentrate to manage our leakage.
So that's going to take 3 years to actually...
It's a 3-year program.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we wanted to expedite that, we could, but we just need to obviously bring the costs forward. Yep. So once we've been through that process and we developed our district metered areas, so we're basically zoning up our network, we can better manage pressure and flow and leakage, and acoustic sensors could be part of that solution. But as far as having sensors as an intermediate or an interim chlorine-free measure, they don't actually change our risk profile or reduce risks. So we have to show a multi-barrier approach. So we have to have things that kill, disable or remove pathogens, and sensors obviously won't do that. They're of real benefit for us for understanding the network and how it works and how we can manage it better, but it doesn't reduce our risk profile in that way.
And in terms of when we're looking at the investment in acoustic sensors, is that happening in the immediate short term?
We'd need to set that up as a project to investigate. So there'd be a time period to look at, and ideally we'd want to tie that in with our leakage detection project.
Program.
Yep. To look at where we would place those.
For you, Madam Mayor, you just ran through, Kath, almost a definition, I think, of barriers being to remove or disable pathogens.
Remove, kill or inactivate.
Or inactivate. Where does that come from, that definition?
That's part of the 6 fundamentals for safe drinking water.
Held in some ministry guidance
Well,
document?
we have to demonstrate the 6 principles within our water safety plan. So we're legally required to do that. And we've had our implementation audit recently where one of the improvements we have is to better embrace the 6 principles. So it's been identified that there are areas that we aren't necessarily embracing as well as we could.
So further to that, we're aware that Christchurch City Council has put forward their new water safety plan for approval, which does not include chlorination. So how are they able to put together a water safety plan that isn't addressing this particular principle?
Sure. So I haven't actually seen their water safety plan, but I've got a number of contacts in the industry and it's been talked about. My assumption would be that they are putting forward a water safety plan that excludes chlorination because that's their ultimate goal. Christchurch's water safety plan is being reviewed by an expert panel of practitioners that are it's an international panel. So the process, I think, I'm not quite sure where they've got to now, but I know that they were reviewing it about a month ago. So they would be going through that review, how are they managing their risks, then the panel would make recommendations to the Ministry of Health, and then I'm assuming the Ministry of Health would make decisions from that point onwards to see whether or not their water safety plan demonstrates that they manage their risks.
And do we have any idea of timeframes around that process at this stage?
Sorry, no. Yeah. All right. So the Ministry of Health haven't actually given us any guidance on what this other option, chlorine-free or disinfectant residual option could be. And so that's why this project will be New Zealand leading, essentially, because we will be the test case with the ministry to see what they would accept. So they've indicated that the bar would be set high, and they've indicated that they would expect it to be something along the lines of what they do in Denmark and the Netherlands. So earlier in the year, I did a very high-level scoping of what those potential costs could be, and that came out at around $100 to $150 million for the capital works. And then there would be operational costs as well, which would likely be quite a lot more expensive than what we currently charge. But the point of this review is to have a really robust review of what the 2 options could be and what those costs would be, because we want to go back to the community with something that's really defensible. So just one of the questions we get asked is, no one got sick before, so why can't we just turn the chlorine off? So in New Zealand, we've had generally quite a complacent view around the management of water safety, and Havelock North has demonstrated that there are real consequences to not taking this seriously and not managing our supplies at the level that we need to manage them. So this has now changed our entire water industry. And as a result, we're getting a new regulator and potentially having some mandatory constraints put onto us. And as I mentioned before, we've actually had 5 E. coli results in 2017, and when I've looked back, we've had at least 2 incidences every year, and I just looked back about 15 years. So we have demonstrable risks. There are risks in our network, and in my view, we've just been pretty fortunate that it hasn't become a network-wide incident. So having chlorine is about managing risk. It's a bit like wearing a seatbelt. It won't protect us against everything, but it is one of the other ways that we can manage risk. Water supplies around the world that do have chlorine and don't have chlorine both have issues with contamination events. So the conversation is bigger than just chlorine. It's about all the support processes, the asset management, the training, the systems and tools that we have in place, and what level they are at to make sure that we have a safe water supply. And in the Dutch model, that is at an extremely high level, and in New Zealand, we're nowhere near that. So it's a very good goal to aim for, but obviously there are implications around cost and time to get there. So let's just talk about what we are doing. If I can get my lovely assistant to hand me my pipe. Oh, it's down here. So hopefully I won't be known for the lady with the dirty water pipe. But so if we just look at this, this is a fabricated sample of dirty water. So it's not what most people get. We took several samples of dirty water so that we could get a dramatic result like this. But you see the water that was there before was nice and clear, and then with a little bit of agitation you get the biofilm and the manganese discolouring the water. So this is essentially what's happening in the network. There's biofilm on the outsides of the pipe, and that includes manganese dioxide, which is the substance that discolours the water. And through chemical scour and physical scour, this is what happens. So we leave that now for the rest of this session. It will settle and it will be clear again. So while I've just talking, I'll just remind people to drink the clear water, not to drink the dirty water. And if they have a problem, please try and flush it yourselves. If you can't flush it yourselves, to ring us and we'll come and help you out. So what are we doing about dirty water? We've had operational programs, so if people do call us and have an issue, we will turn up at the house and flush their lines. In some places this works well, in other places it doesn't work so well. We've pigged 110 kilometres of water main this year, and we put in extra pigging points. So pigging is when we put a foam squab into the pipe. We run it through several times until the water comes clear. So this is more pipe network than we've ever cleaned before, and the plan moving forward would be to have more access to more pipe network in the upcoming years so that we can clean those. But one of the other 2 major issues are the manganese in our source water. So we have 2 bores where the manganese level is high enough that it will react with the chlorine to precipitate onto the manganese oxide. So in summer, we become quite reliant on these 2 bores, which is why we do have a pickup in dirty water issues in summer. So ideally, we want to move away from the reliance on those 2 bores and keep that level of manganese below 0.015 milligrams per litre. And then the other issue is flows in the network. So Tamatea is our most impacted suburb. So we've been doing some modelling recently around the Tamatea zone and seeing if we can isolate that and feed it from our reservoir in Taradale. This would have the effect of not having the water that is coming from our 2 problem bores. The water would come directly from a Taradale aquifer with Taradale reservoir with lower manganese, and there's a chance for any solids to actually settle out in the reservoir. So all the clean water is drawn off the top, and it would be a single feed into that zone, which should help with pressure and flow. So that would be a trial. We're still looking to see what the impacts would be on the surrounding zones, because we want to make sure that we're not going to be causing low flow or pressure issues elsewhere. So that's one thing we're doing that will specifically help Tamatea. And then we're also looking at dividing the network into two zones. So we essentially have like a Napier City zone and then a Taradale zone. The long-term goal is to definitely have those two zones and feed from reservoirs to them. That will help with pressure and flow. But we're looking to see whether we could do something in the interim to help with those issues. So we've also looked at the potential of having pilot plants basically attached to those two main bores that are the issue. But when we've looked at what's out there, we just couldn't get anything that would cope with the demand or the volume that we would need to be able to supply. And then when we've looked at less temporary options, the time frame and the cost and procurement process to get through that would be similar to just getting to a water source where there is no manganese. So the decision was made that why spend, say, up to $800,000 or $1 million on a green sand filter on one of the bores that we're potentially getting rid of anyway. It makes more sense to invest our time and energy into looking at our new bore fields, which we're doing at the moment, looking for water sources that are low in manganese. So we have identified two sites that we're looking at in more detail now. We believe that the water quality in those areas would be very good. The next step is to drop some test bores, test the water for the water chemistry, so looking at manganese, but also to see whether we can get the flow that we need from them. So we've recently done a water master strategy, which has identified $40 million worth of projects. We're going through all of those with a fine-tooth comb at the moment, seeing whether those costs are realistic, which projects we should do now, and how we can tie in the actions for dirty water into that overall program. So where we can, the ultimate plan would be to get one of our bore fields up and running with maybe one or two bores feeding into the network so that we can get rid of C1 and A1. And that's a process that we have underway at the moment.
We have a question here from...
Sure.
Thank you. Kath, you mentioned the sand filter, the green sand filter to remove manganese to alleviate the dirty water issue in the interim, but kind of quickly said that wasn't the case and we'd better spend our money on the bore field. Would we be able to do one quicker than the other? Like how soon could we get a manganese removing sand filter to alleviate those dirty water issues?
Hastings are putting in a green sand filter at the moment. I can check with them on their timeframes, but when we've looked at the time frame to get a new bore drilled and some pipe work into the network, I think it would be pretty similar. And the cost of a green sand filter to put on a bore that we're actually going to get rid of, if it's around $1 million, it doesn't really add up to do that. So we're investing our time and energy into just going for water without manganese.
And that should be about the same time frame?
Yeah. I think about the same time frame, if not faster,
okay.
Depending on the industry, obviously. Yeah. Right. So as we go through all these projects, we realise that we haven't been communicating with the community as frequently or as well as we could be. In fact, I was talking to someone last night who said, we just don't really know what's going on, so we're just filling in the blanks, essentially. So that's something that we really need to step up on over the next year. And in the first couple of weeks back, we're looking at a common strategy around the work that we are doing. Okay, so that's sort of the background to why we are where we are. Do you have any more questions around that?
Councillor Price.
Just one thing I'd like to, could you just tell us your experience and your qualifications? Because you've given quite a good rundown. It'd be good to know.
Sure.
How good you are.
So I'm a civil engineer, qualified at Auckland University, and I've spent the last 20 odd years largely working in asset management in the water industry. So some of the companies I've worked for, I was principal planner at Metro Water in Auckland before they became part of Watercare. I worked for Thames Water UK and managed a $3 million leakage detection project or leakage management project there. Worked for Southern Water UK, Essex and Suffolk Water, managing security code of practice in water reservoirs. And then back in New Zealand, worked for Metro Water and also as a consultant worked as an auditor for operations or operational licences for Hunter Water and Sydney Water. So I've had good exposure to water companies that do things really, really well. I mean, some of them obviously massive organisations with lots of resources and lots of funding. But I have seen how it's done well, and I do see the way forward for us.
Councillor Bowie.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. That's really helpful. With the pigging process, I understand that removes biofilm, is it? Is it a one-off process? Is it a one-off event, or is it something that has to be done as the biofilm keep building up? And yep.
Yes, it's an ongoing process. So we've been running a pigging program for years and years, and I know we've got data going back at least 10 years. So it is something that we would have to keep doing anyway, but the belief at the moment is that we have a build-up in the network and we need to start clearing that. And there's been a lot of the network we haven't been able to access, so that's a priority as well, to be able to access more of the network, to clean more of the network. And once we have the manganese removed from our water source, the issues will be dealt with a lot better. Yeah.
Councillor Simpson and then Councillor Mawson.
2 questions. Firstly, the new bore sites. Is there any risk that there's going to be manganese present in those areas?
There is a risk that could be the case, but we have tested a lot of bores in the vicinity of the 2 sites that we're looking at, and the water quality has been excellent. And particularly when we look at where our A1 bore is in Awatoto, when we've tested used the bores that are in place, moving away sort of further south, you can actually see the decrease in manganese as you move further south towards one of the sites we're looking at. So yes, there is a risk until we do our drawdown tests and water quality tests, but we've gone for areas where it looks pretty good.
Thank you. And secondly, there's 4 major capital projects stated in your report. What's the ultimate time frame to implement all 4 of those?
Right, so the projects are the 2 new bore fields, the dedicated pipe worked, rising mains up to the reservoirs, replacement of our infield reservoir, and then separation of the network into zones. So the infield reservoir is replacements. We've got a reservoir up there which is, I think, is about 50 years old. More than 50 years old, and it's at end of life, so we need to replace that. So that project involves land, so procurement of land. So there are time frame risks around that and how long that will take us to purchase. And then we'll probably expect 2 to 3 years for the new reservoir to be built. Then we've got a lot of pipe work that we need to put through between those reservoirs. So we're looking at breaking up the projects, but we know that infield reservoir replacement, wherever we go with a new reservoir, that will take 3 years or so, and we'll have to have pipe work up to that new reservoir. So in the interim, we would get the new bore field set up and then connect those bore fields to the network so that we're feeding that good quality water in. And then as soon as the reservoir is in place, then we connect it to the reservoir. So that's probably one of our longer projects at around 3 years. The others, we're looking at a really ambitious program and doing things concurrently. We'll be breaking up different projects, so as soon as one is complete, we've already done all the pre-work to get the next one going. An optimistic view for some of these would be 2 years, but we have to also be cognizant of the fact that Hastings have a huge program in their water team as well, and there's a lot of work going on around the region, so it's how can we actually get or ensure we have the consultants and the contractors to do the work. So we'll probably be looking at work, getting people from outside the Hawke's Bay as well to help us out.
Thank you.
Councillor Mawson.
Through you, Madam Chair. You mentioned that in last year the water was made number 1 priority. I'm just wondering, can you just let everyone know what you've done between then and now being number 1 priority? Now, I do understand that the infrastructure team have done very, very well with their firefighting, they're cleaning the pipes and stuff, and they're to be commended on that. I've had, from the people I've talked in the public, plenty of good feedback, and they're very attentive to sorting those problems out. Can you just let us know what you have done since that time?
So we've had a lot of enabling projects that have been completed this year, and one of those has been the water model. So we've actually had our water, wastewater and stormwater models all being worked on this year, and we've now received them all as of last week. Yep. So we've now got all three models. We've got our water supply strategy or master plan complete, and tomorrow and the next day we're reviewing tenders for the wastewater and stormwater strategies to get those underway, and that will feed into the LTP for next year and our infrastructure strategy. So those master supply or master strategies will be completed by July next year. So there's a lot of that sort of work. We've been making improvements and obviously implementing our water safety plan. When we talk about water being our number one priority, it's not just looking at water, it's obviously all three waters. So our environmental solutions team have been doing an amazing job with stormwater and looking at how to improve the impact on the environment from work that either we're doing or industry are doing and their impact. And wastewater, largely a lot of planning at the moment. We've got a couple of major projects underway that will looking at our wastewater treatment plant and our outfall. So we've been doing a lot of planning work essentially over the last year, and that will all come to a head July next year.
Kath, this isn't a new question that I've asked you, but I think it would be good to run through again. I think there is an option, certainly in my mind, that we push back against that requirement for chlorination in the interim. And I wonder if you could answer for me the question, if council was to direct, say, the removal of chlorine, an interim chlorine-free, possibly after some investment in risk management in the network rather than barriers per se, defined like you did earlier. So what would be the result? What would happen? Tease out for me what would happen if council were to go interim chlorine-free against the ministry, the approved water safety plan with the ministry.
Okay, so there's a couple of elements. The main thing is how are we going to manage risk. So anything we do, we have to look at how we're demonstrating that we will manage the risks in our network that we've identified, and that's source and network risks. If we were to remove chlorine was something that was far below the standard that the ministry would be expecting, they would not approve our water safety plan. And then they could move towards a compliance order ordering us to reinstate chlorine. And if we didn't do that, then we would be likely prosecuted. So that's that process. So whatever we would do would have to, hand on heart, be able to demonstrate that the work we were doing would be able to manage the risks. And I guess the point of doing this review is having an external group to essentially inform us as to what that level would be to show that we can manage our risks in the network.
And this is another question I think I've asked you before. So you've got, I think, 10 people in your water team from various different backgrounds, internationally and nationally, working in the supply of drinking water. Is there any dissenting view within that team of people around our ability to have interim chlorine-free water?
So we've got 7 in our team, and as you said, yes, they are all from different backgrounds within the water industry. I believe that we all have a pretty similar view. When this was asked in a recent meeting, we had 3 staff who all said that they wouldn't want their children to drink the water if it didn't have chlorine in it. So I think we are combined in our view that given our level of process and asset management and the risks that we've identified in the network at the moment, we would not be comfortable removing chlorine. And even with chlorine, we have a lot of things that we need to get on with and do, which we are to improve the safety of our network. So, as you know, we're currently operating under a water safety plan which is outdated. So the new framework came in late last year. Yeah. So late last year we had the new water safety plan framework that came in. We are currently working under the old water safety plan framework, and from our implementation audit recently we had, I think it was around 8 recommendations for improvement. So we've got improvements to make with chlorine against the current water safety plan framework. Then we're going to need to take the next step up to the new water safety plan framework, and we've got a project which has kicked off already to look at a gap analysis around where we are now and where we would need to get to the new water safety plan framework. So there's a bulk of work that we have to do anyway with chlorine, and then the chlorine-free review would step above that. So basically we're here now and we've got improvements to make. We need to get there, we make improvements, and then the water safety plan for chlorine-free would be at a level up here. So those are the sort of steps that we're doing. And it's worth noting that all the work that we're doing now is for water quality, safety and resilience of our network, and having the right pressure and flow for firefighting, etc. And all of this work will keep us in good stead regardless of which option we go through. So if we stay with chlorine, we need to do this work. If we remove chlorine, we also need to do this work.
Catherine, just with regards to concerns that have been raised by some that one of the risks within our network is protozoa such as Giardia, which isn't actually, chlorine isn't effective against killing those types of germs. What do we have in place, or what's the risk associated for us and with regards to protozoa?
Sure. So the protozoa risk is mainly concentrated around our source water. So our water age testing that has been done shows that our youngest water is around 2 years old. There are some rumblings in the industry that potentially protozoa could survive for up to 3 years in water supply, but that's sort of something that's being teased out at the moment. So at the moment, having bore security status was the way that we demonstrated that we didn't have a protozoa risk, essentially. But with more research being done and the ministry moving away from reliance on bore security status, because it doesn't talk at all about network risk, we need to be looking at, I guess, other ways to address that. So when we put in our 2 new bore fields, we will put in UV treatment at those 2 treatment plants, which would address any potential risk from the water supply, water source. But you're right, chlorine won't have an impact there. So chlorine is more around having that seatbelt in the network.
Right. And so the risks to us at the moment are far more within our network as opposed to the source.
Yes, I think there are still risks in the source water. We've got 6 or 8,000 bores in the aquifer. A lot of those are private. Who knows how they're being managed or not being managed at all. There's plenty of evidence of fecal contamination getting into aquifers via bores that aren't well managed. So there are risks, and also we're on 2 fault lines here. In my 3rd week in Napier, we had it felt like a massive earthquake to me. We had an earthquake, and who knows what that's doing to the aquifer or our bores or whatever.
Yeah, just taking a step back in terms with those private bores, there is going to be expectation going forward that property owners who have a private bore feeding more than 2 dwellings, are going to have to produce their own water safety plan?
Yes, so with the potential new regulations that are being proposed, if you have a private bore and you feed your neighbour, you will have the same responsibility as we would as a water supplier. But some of that responsibility also comes back on us in that we need to assist those people with developing their water safety plans. So there are various ways that this could be managed. In some areas we could actually have a water supply provision in those areas. We'd need to obviously investigate that. But we also need to realise that there will be an increase in workload for us helping to manage those risks for those suppliers where they are supplying their neighbours.
Councillor Crystal, did I see you raise your hand?
Yeah. Mine was a little bit, you've sort of asked it, but with the source, with their water safety plans, with the government, are they taking, obviously our source is pretty pure water at the moment, and if no things occur, is that taken into account for the level that they set these water safety plans at? Because obviously we're not the same as Auckland, who are drawing out of the Waikato River and stuff. We've got a pretty pure water source at the moment coming out.
And we're very lucky for that because we actually have to do very minimal treatment, like really minimal treatment. If you look at the likes of Hamilton, when they're taking water out of the Waikato, they have about 11 steps and they use a lot of chemicals. They have coagulation, flocculation, they've got sand filters, you name it, they've got it. Whereas all we're looking at is literally passing water through a UV lighting system and then dosing with chlorine, and that's it. So we are very lucky.
Councillor Tapane.
So, first of all, great work and thank you for those explanations. It was fantastic to hear the extensive work that our team have been doing. and an indication of the commitment that our team and this council has around addressing water. I do know there have been a number of significant questions coming from some of our other regional partners around, is Napier committed to water being a priority? So I look forward to sharing that conversation with those same partners and providing that feedback back. My question is around your engagement at an industry level and at a ministry level. So fantastic work, and I'm fully behind what our team are trying to achieve. But I'm concerned, I have asked the Ministry of Health myself, so I'm wondering whether or not you or anyone in our team has had any indications from the Ministry of Health around whether or not there is a conversation and the difference between safe water and healthy water, and whether there's a conversation around the value or the impacts of long-term sustained exposure to chlorine in a water network.
So the main concern people have around chlorination in a water network is around disinfection byproducts. There is research that shows that there is a linkage with certain cancers from distribution byproducts in water supplies. Because we have a very good quality water source, we have quite low organics in our network. So typically, if you have, say, a river source, you would have more organics in your water, and therefore, with chlorine added, you would have more byproducts that could potentially cause cancer. We test every 6 months for byproducts in our network, and we've never detected anything. And I'm not sure if you were at the meeting, but when we had the Ministry of Health talking with us about 8 months ago, they said that they also wouldn't expect us to have distribution byproducts because of our groundwater supply. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No. But that's okay. It was a good answer. It just wasn't the answer I was particularly looking for. I was at the meeting 8 months ago with MOA, the Ministry of Health, and I did ask them the same question. I was hoping that perhaps they may have reached a level of enlightenment around that, but
yes, you're talking about, I guess, life force of water more than it being purely safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the conversation is around safety, and that's what we're getting through from the MOH.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just further to that, in terms of safety, you were talking about the manganese earlier and advising people not to drink it. But my understanding is that the levels of manganese that we have in our network do not pose any health risk if someone was to drink it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the level of manganese in our clear water is well below the maximum allowable value in the drinking water standards. So there's no concern around drinking, but please don't drink the dirty water. It has higher levels of manganese in it, and apart from tasting horrible and just looking gross, it could potentially have health impacts if you drank it over a prolonged period.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Hi, Kath. The conversations you're having with the ministry, and obviously they would acknowledge that we are leaders in terms of commissioning what this paper is about. Is there any discussion being had or around potential funding sources through the ministry as well? Because obviously the outcome of this review will have some benefit nationally around setting what that, or giving some guidance to what that acceptable level of non-chlorinated networks look like.
That's an awesome point. I think we should go and talk to them about that.
Right, if there's no further questions on this background setting, then we'll actually move to the paper before us, which is around the procurement strategy for our chlorine-free option review.
Okay, thank you. So, getting on to the procurement strategy, the outcome of the review that we are proposing is 2 options that we can go back to the community with so that we can consult on the way forward for our water supply. The first option would be looking at what the real costs are for us to deliver safe water with chlorine under the new Water Safety Plan framework. And then the second option would be how we deliver safe water under the new Water Safety Plan framework and the new regulations that is chlorine-free. So, as I mentioned, the work that we're already doing and have underway would form the basis of either option. So one of the reasons why I want to make sure we accurately cost our current or sort of status quo plus service delivery is so that we've got a really accurate number for that we're then comparing that with the future state. Because at the moment I think we're probably underfunded, particularly for where we need to go with the improvements in the new water safety plan framework. So I want to make sure that we've got a very clear understanding of what our current costs should be versus what the future costs would be. So essentially the outcome is 2 fully costed options for water supply that we can go back to the community and consult with on. Any questions about or thoughts around the outcome, required outcome?
Could I ask just a question of clarification through you, Madam Mayor? Just a question, Kath. I was reading obviously through the terms of reference in the evaluation criteria for people who come back to us through the registering of interest process.
Yep.
What question are they asked? Because they're asked to, comment on price, for example. Could you direct me to where exactly the question they're asked is, or is that not formed up yet?
I haven't formed that yet. I think the reason I put that in is that obviously we've already gone out with what our budget is. So what I want to know from those who do respond through the ROI process is this budget sufficient for the work that we're asking for?
And I suppose that's the point. What is the work we're asking for? Are you going to replicate the council resolution from June, which was that council commission an independent options and costings assessment report for the supply of unchlorinated water? Will it be as simple as that, or what will you ask them?
So shall I go back, maybe step back a bit and talk about the 2-phase process? Would that help? Because then that would explain when we're asking for what.
I'd find it helpful.
Yeah, I think I understand. Sorry, would you mind? I think I understand that there will be a request for interest in performing the work, and then we'll rate those, spit out some options, which council will then pick one based on the detailed sort of options they give us back. I suppose in the registering of interest, what are we asking them to register interest in?
So they're registering their interest in doing the work for us, and as part of that, the work,
What
yes,
is the
to
work?
deliver a cost and options analysis of moving to chlorine-free network.
Perfect.
So they will have that in there. So there'll be a background of what we're trying to achieve, but we won't be giving them all the nitty-gritty that will come in the RFP process. So they will know that this is the work that they're trying to be involved with, but we're essentially running a 2-phase process, so an ROI or registration of interest, which enables any qualified party to submit to us their interest, their experience, their track record, and their expertise in the water industry. And then once we go through that process, we'll evaluate them all, we'll shortlist 3 preferred suppliers. That will, I had initially said that would go to the Director of Infrastructure to sign off and approve, and then we would issue the RFP process. We would do a similar process there, but that would be based on the methodology and the price. So those would be the 2 main areas that we would be looking at in the RFP. And then we would put a recommendation to you based on those 3 proposals, and then that would be up to full council to make the decision around who we go with.
And then the expectation from the selected provider would be to provide the 2 options, one being chlorine-free and one being a...
So we have talked about potentially in the RFP we could say, yes, 2 options eventually, but as far as the chlorine-free options, we could get them to do a high-level assessment of more than one option and then do a more detailed assessment of their recommended option so that we can see that they have considered more than one potential option for chlorine-free.
Okay.
So one of the things that we need to talk about is, as part of the tender evaluation team, we've suggested that a councillor could be involved in that team, either as an evaluator or as an observer. We also had another recommendation that I might just get Sharon to quickly mention. Do you want
So one of the other suggestions, sorry.
It's already on.
It was on.
So one of the other suggestions, just given the nature of this and the fact it's quite a high profile project is to actually engage the services of an independent probity advisor. We've done that in the past, and it's just a really good way to demonstrate.
Sorry, we can't hear. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
It is better.
Is that better? So I'll just repeat that. One of the suggestions, and I think it would be a really good idea on this project, is to engage the services of an independent probity advisor. It's a really good idea when you have a project that can either be contentious or has quite a high public profile, to ensure that the process is deemed robust for that independent person and ensure that there's minimal external influences on the process. So I know that we've done that for a number of projects in the past, and I think it could work really well here.
Councillor Taylor.
Just, you mentioned then that we've done it in the past. Can you give someone, perhaps the Chief Executive or yourself, what projects have we used that for in the past?
I'm not sure of the specific projects, but I know we've used the McHale group, so Sean McHale in particular, on a few projects. I'm fairly new to council and wasn't involved in those. I have used his services previously when I worked at the DHB, and it was, again, just a really good way on some of those high-profile projects to get that independent lens, so that it's not just that the process is robust. You're independent and seen to be independent.
I agree with the process. I was just wondering if someone in council could.
You met me? Yeah, we've used this process before, particularly with the wastewater treatment plant, so the BTF plant, which we did. So we used a probity process on that, and it is quite standard on particularly large projects or where you've got projects with risk where you want to maintain that probity assurance.
Okay.
Correct.
Just, sorry, question of clarification. Is this a new recommendation? I didn't see that in the report. Has that just come through today, so that would need to be part of the resolution if we were to go down that track?
It is an additional suggestion.
Additional. Okay, thank you.
You can, suggestion is you can either include that as a resolution, or it's just standard practice that we can just build that in.
The intention is, I don't think it changes anything in the report, because we're not changing the makeup of the tender evaluation team. This would be not from an evaluation perspective, but an advisory role.
Okay, through the Mayor. So I guess we just need to talk about how you would want to engage with us through this process. So if we did have someone from one of the councillors on our tender evaluation team, that would mean that they would be excluded from the final decision around which consultant we go with. So it could be useful to have someone as an observer, and then we can have the 3 technical people doing the review.
Certainly my preference, I think, would be that all councillors have the ability to actually vote on this, so that we do just have an observer councillor on that process.
Okay, I think that's it from me, if there's any more questions.
Any questions from councillors?
One question.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, your wish for
You wouldn't let us
down.
My question is around the current cost we've allocated. I know that the council initially put the motion forward. We wanted to initiate an investigation into options, and the $200,000 was an unqualified figure that we just sort of threw out on the table. Your report clearly indicates that this is potentially a part of a much bigger project which could have much wider consequences over New Zealand than just what we want to achieve here in Napier. Are we, as you've mentioned before, solely relying on the feedback that we're going to get from the ROIs and the EOIs to better define that potential cost? So as those responses come back, that detail will arrive here, and we'll be able to re-engage in around the scope and resources we want to apply to that?
Well, ideally, when we get the RFP, that will we will get prices there that will tell us if we're on the money or not, so to speak. But with any project, people have to work within a budget. So our budget is $200,000. If anyone says, "Oh, that's way too low for what we're trying to do," we might need to rethink it. But it should be sufficient, I think, for what we're trying to achieve. We are actually doing quite a detailed project here. It's not a high-level review. It could get quite detailed.
And just seeking clarification, Catherine, you made the comment that no matter which path we go down, that essentially going forward every dollar we spend is actually relevant or working towards the delivery of safe chlorine-free water. We won't be spending anything unnecessarily for the delivery of chlorine when our ultimate goal, if possible, is to deliver chlorine-free water.
The only thing to take into account there is we are building 2 treatment plants which will have chlorination in them. But we obviously need to retain chlorine until we're at a state where we can remove it. So I don't see that as being a wasted cost.
So those treatment plants would not be necessary if we weren't chlorinating.
The UV part would be.
Councillor Brown.
Just on that, would having the option to dose with chlorine when we are chlorine-free in the case of emergency not be beneficial anyway?
Absolutely, we'd have to have emergency dosing because if we do have an incident, we need to be able to clear the network as quickly as we can.
So that could come as part of our rationalisation for going chlorine-free, that we're able to be able to quickly respond in an emergency.
Yep, and that's what's done overseas, so we would have to have that as a part of our demonstration of managing risk.
There's no further questions. Do I have a mover of the motion in front of us? Okay. Sorry, did you want to move or did you have further questions?
I was just going to note through the discussion, I see possibly a number of slight changes and additions to the resolution, and I just wonder if council would be happy for me to read through where I got to through that discussion on a resolution and see if that sits well and if there's a seconder for it.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't quite finished typing it all up as Kath was speaking, but so the first I think is the same. Note the report titled Procurement Strategy to engage a consultant to complete a chlorine-free drinking water review be received. B, adopt the review outcome, being to develop 2 or more defensible options for safe drinking water to take to the community. C, approve the procurement strategy. Sorry, I'll wait for staff.
Fine, I'm taking notes.
That's all right.
Multitasking.
So the only addition, Cherie, to B was 2 or more defensible.
Is that you, minute?
C, approve the procurement strategy to engage a consultant to complete a drinking water review for Napier City Council, which includes a 2-stage procurement process to provide a chlorine-free water assessment, including a registration of interest, followed by a request for proposal.
To provide a chlorine-free
assessment. Chlorine-free water assessment, including a registration of interest, followed by a request for proposal. D, note the inclusion of an independent probity advisor in the process. E,
sorry, you're going to need to
slow
slow
down.
down.
Sorry, Cherie.
It was D.
That was
D,
D.
or was that?
That was D.
Did I do that because I'm here?
E, investigate Ministry of Health funding opportunities for the report, noting the national implications of being the first to investigate chlorine-free network under the new regulations. F. If that a communications strategy be developed, or note that a communications strategy will be developed and presented to council in the new year.
Which one are we going with, sorry?
Note that a communication strategy will be developed.
Presented to council.
And implemented?
I was going to say that will be across all drinking water, won't it? For all drinking water and brought back to council in the new year.
Councillor Brosnan, is
Ballot
it just
for all
drinking water or 3 waters?
I think the communication strategy was specific to
This.
drinking water,
Yeah.
noting
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
our area where we hadn't been communicating well. That was,
Thank you for the clarity.
G. And final one is a recommendation bearing in mind our portfolios, and that was that Councillor Simpson be appointed to be the observer on the ROI process.
That was my intention. I just was going to have a conversation with Councillor Simpson.
I'm just
beforehand.
looking at him because I haven't had a conversation, but it fits well. So.
It does.
But as noted in the report, that observer status still gives me right to be
That's
part
correct.
of the...
Yes. Yeah.
So that was where I got to, Madam Mayor, with the discussion, and I'm quite happy for that to be played around with before it is seconded.
Through the Mayor, could I just make a comment on a couple of those points?
Absolutely.
So with point C, by adding in, I guess, focusing on chlorine-free water assessment, it potentially doesn't enable us to do the review of the gap analysis of the work that we have to do for the water safety plan.
Against status quo or against planned capital works?
Madam Mayor? It needs to identify that the analysis is against the new legislation.
Yep.
Yeah.
The planned capital works to meet.
Well, it's not only the planned capital works, it's also the operating environment as well.
Happy to take a suggestion on wording.
Sorry, which point is that?
That's C. So the point I was making in the inclusion of that was I saw the gap in what we were approving today didn't have what the question was we were asking people to present an ROI on.
Could we say to provide a solution that addresses the review's outcomes or something like that?
Yeah, that's fine because we've stated the review outcome in A. So
Can I ask a clarifying question on A? It was my understanding that the review was to come up with 2, maybe 3 options. So one that's I'll use my analogy again, a Toyota, so a reliable network, a reliable Toyota that'll do the job and it'll get us all there safely, and then a Rolls-Royce option of a chlorine-free system. So, and we might have a couple of options of the Rolls-Royce that we're going to look at buying, but I thought the Toyota was in there too.
Yep.
It is? Okay. Is that clear in A?
Probably aim for a Lexus,
The outputs of the review are quite clear in the strategy. So
Okay.
by referring to strategy, hopefully we've covered that.
Yeah.
Covered that. And the other comment was just really like the idea of seeing if we can get some funding from the ministry. We just need to be aware that that will delay things and potentially could need a ministerial involvement.
I think just commentary on that. I think we're asking to investigate it. We're not saying hold anything up, while those investigations are ongoing. Yeah, is my view, but that be council's.
And I guess just a point of clarification around that, because are we the first, with Christchurch having already pulled together a water safety plan which is under the new framework, I understand, and if it is indeed around chlorine free, then perhaps they're the first.
That was actually a question I was going to ask about it when we got to the stage. To me, that's Christchurch might be ahead of us,
Yeah.
so it might be a bit of an interesting area.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think I understand what you're trying to achieve with this. So Christchurch have done a water safety plan based upon the new regulations, but they've done it to what they perceive as being their standards required. Ministry of Health have been very open in terms of not really specifying what's required because you have to demonstrate to it. I think if you could just make it clear that the review the process can continue whilst those discussions occur, because at the moment it would sort of state that we have to do that investigation, come back around it. I mean, it may be that the Ministry of Health comes in, we can have a discussion with them, But unless you can enable the review to continue, what you will do is impact upon the ability to get this completed should you want to take it into an LTP.
Yeah, no, that's not the intention. So I'm happy to add on to the end of E. Note, all works will continue
as scheduled
whilst this is being investigated, or something like that, to make it clear.
Yep.
Sorry, just through the chair, just going back to the first to investigate. Is there different wording we can put on there as maybe being one of the leaders or rather than first? Because we don't know if we're first. And I just think that's could end up being a little bit misleading.
One of the first?
leaders in investigating. Comfortable with leaders?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Runners.
Leader in the investigation.
Runners, I don't know.
Leaders in the investigation.
Investigation instead of investigate.
Should get there. Yeah, upsetting Christchurch if somebody else.
If there's no further questions or clarifications, do we have someone to second the... Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Brosnan, would you like to talk to the motion?
I suppose I've got to talk to it then. Yeah, I think, you know, this is a significant step forward for Napier in, I think, leading the way in doing an in-depth analysis of what a chlorine-free network might look like nationally. I don't, even though Christchurch should have a water safety plan put forward with, you know, we're surmising chlorine-free included in it. This piece of work I don't think has been done to the kind of level we're talking about nationally. So we will be one of the first, and that's why, you know, when you talk to the team, the level of interest they've already had internationally for organisations who might look to come and give us a registration of interest on this is already heightened. So it's an important step forward. You know, I'm personally really frustrated at the inability of us to safely invest in options to remove chlorine in the interim. I think, you know, the professional advice we've had around that is that by doing so we leave ourselves open to litigation, and that's not something that I certainly want to be looking at in a governance role. We've gone down that path too often, I think. So I'm frustrated that we're not able to do it quicker and faster and get a better result earlier. But I understand from the team, and I have to take that professional advice around where we've got to today. I think this is this resolution is a great collection, I suppose, of our discussion today around making sure that we have some independence in terms of that probity advisor. Thank you for the recommendation in doing that. That gives us as governors some certainty around the kind of process we're going to see spit out of this, having nothing but independence on it. And our community are demanding that of us as well, the transparency and the independence to this review. So I'm excited that we will get, you know, one, if not more, options for chlorine-free for our network into the future out of this review. And then it will really be over to the community to tell us whether or not that's affordable. And that's a key step in this process. So we need to gather the information, have the right people giving that to us, and then take it back out to the community and see over what period of time we can achieve that end goal. So thank you.
Anyone else like to talk to the motion?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank Deputy Mayor Brosnan for the work on the amendment, because many of those notes are what I had noted as an expectation of an outcome. I think we have to acknowledge that good outcomes take time. To ensure that the safety of our community is paramount takes time. And I think we just have to accept that if we work with the other organisations that are involved in this process, we'll end up with a good outcome for our community. So therefore I naturally speak for the proposal, and I think we've put in place a reasonably robust process to make a progressive start on an outcome that our community is seeking.
Thank you. Councillor Tapani.
I'll be brief, Your Worship. So I am speaking in favour of the amended motion in support of Councillor Brosnan and Councillor Simpson's comments. I just want to take the opportunity to acknowledge the work our staff have done since the Havelock North incident. It was necessary for us as a municipality to react quickly. Despite the fact I'm not a fan of dirty water and chlorine in our system, I'm strongly in favour of looking at viable options. I do want to acknowledge the efforts and energies of our staff over these number of months and their focus on providing safe water, reducing risk, and ensuring that delivery to that we were doing everything we can to provide good service to the delivery of our residents. So that's the only thing I'd like to add to the comments that I added today. Kia ora.
Councillor Crown.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to pick up on one of the acknowledgements that the staff made, yourself, Catherine, was that acknowledgement that the public hasn't been communicated with as effectively as possible since the priority was made in June. And it's great to hear you guys acknowledge that and for everyone to understand that we're in a position now where we're committing to stepping up in that regard, making sure that our public and our community are aware of what is happening. It's very clear that lots is, so let's tell them. So thank you.
Very good point. There's no one else that's wishing to speak to the motion. I too would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the staff across the entire council who I know are just as frustrated as our community with these ongoing issues, particularly with the dirty water and the manganese. And I hear nothing but praise from the community for our depot staff that have been going out and flushing the water, and I certainly know that Catherine, your team is working tirelessly to find some solutions for this as well. So I do just want to acknowledge and commend everyone, you know, for all the hard work that's being done. On that note, I will now put the motion. So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we are going to take a short break, so we'll adjourn the meeting. I understand we may actually have a light lunch on its way. So,
I told you.
Anna's gone.